everyone, welcome to the Performance Cafe. Specifically, I'd like to welcome you to the Friday Coffee Companion series, where we share coffee, biscuits and learnings as we speak about human performance in organizations. And today we're joined by Ocea Garriock. Ocea is the founder and director of Phoenix Empowering. She has a deep-rooted passion for developing individuals and helping them reach their full potential. She's a coach, public speaker, a workshop facilitator, and she loves sharing her skills and knowledge and developing, coaching, and mentoring emerging leaders with a special focus on young female talent. Ocea has a strong corporate background in South Africa, and she spent over 30 years at IBM, Oracle, and Strategic Solution Architects, amongst other organizations. In these, she fulfilled several leadership and technical roles. She has motivated and led many large high-performance teams to success and looks to continue empowering high-potential individuals within organizations through her coaching and inspired leadership enablement.
Thank you, Innocent. It's lovely to be here.
So, Ocea, there's just too much to talk about in your entire bio. So, what are the things that you like to highlight about your life so far?
Okay, so as you said, I had many years in corporate and I had a wonderful career. I was in very large IT companies, traveling the world and following a technical career in a very man's world, in fact. But I had a wonderful career and I really enjoyed that. I spent many years in technical leadership and I do have a great passion for leadership, which makes our discussion today really appropriate. And then, yes, I had an interesting tenure in Singapore for 3 years, and that was in a startup, which was completely different to being in a corporate. So that was a great experience, and also just experiencing living in a different country, learning new cultures, and I traveled extensively around Southeast Asia, which I had never done, which was an amazing growing experience. And I got to appreciate a lot of the things that I missed about corporate, and I also learned a lot about running a small company and doing your own thing. So when I came back to South Africa, I spent 1 more year in corporate, and now I've started my own company. So I'm very excited and drawing on all of those experiences of years in corporate as well as the startup to run my own company now.
Wonderful. I must say, very challenging doing so during COVID, but very courageous.
Yes, so I actually was retrenched just before COVID. So my second whammy was when COVID came along, and I thought of going back to another corporate job. And then I thought, maybe this is a blessing. This is a chance for me to do what I'm really passionate about. I would love to be in the people business. And I decided to start a company called Phoenix Empowering because I'm kind of rising out of the ashes. And it's focusing on coaching, leadership training, as well as women's networking. And that encompasses all my passions.
Wonderful. And yes, and that's, of course, where we met. I attended a Phoenix Empowering ladies networking event, which I believe the gentlemen were very upset for not being invited to. They obviously knew the quality of the guests that you had and the beautiful setting as well. And I'm looking forward to one shortly again. So, Ocea, with all of this, let's get cracking and taking a look at performance. But it's so beautiful that you have this performance from corporate and performance from startup, and maybe now performance as a young entrepreneur. So tell me, how do you define performance for yourself?
So, Innocent, for me, performance is very related to your success criteria. So if you define success as being rich, for example, then your performance is going to be tracked around your revenue and your profit, because that is what you're driving for. If your success criteria is to have a work-life balance, then you will need to measure yourself in terms of different things. So, success at work as well as having your success at home. So for me, it starts with what are your success criteria? And, we call them key performance indicators or KPIs. And in a corporate, obviously, we set all those up in tools and we track them on a regular basis. And that is how we do our performance management. But I realized when I started my own company, I also need to have those KPIs. So the very first thing I did when I set up my company was, look at what is my business plan, what are my KPIs, and I have to track them now for myself. So, it's very important for us to first decide what is success to us, what are the things we want to achieve, and then we need to work towards performing to those goals.
Lovely. And I love the fact that you mentioned that as an entrepreneur, you need to have those for yourself, because I think so many people go, I'm tired of my boss, I'm tired of corporate, or whatever the case may be, I'm going to do it my way now. And part of my way is no structure at their peril.
So to be honest, when I went to Singapore, the thing I missed the most about corporate, which I had hated for all those years, was the structure. Because, you know, when I was in these large companies, there was so much red tape, and I felt like we were always working towards processes and all of these things. And suddenly in a startup, a brand new one, there were no processes. And boy, did I miss them. There was no HR department to do the hiring. There was no form for anything. So you do need that structure, even in a small company. And in my own company now, I've had to create those. And you have to set them up, and you have to run by them, and you have to drive yourself now, because there, as you say, there is no manager driving you towards your, you know, achieving these things. So it's even harder in some ways, because now it's a lot of self-driven behavior. But I think that having all of that for all of those years taught me a certain amount of discipline in my life, and now taking that discipline into my own company. I am not a process person at all. I'm very much a people person, but I realize these are the things that are necessary to be successful. So I have found myself to be a lot more structured than I expected in my own company.
Awesome. I know what you say. I must admit, I'm quite similar. So if that's how you define performance for yourself, how do we define performance from a more structured organizational approach, where actually I can't decide my success measurements, and I can't decide when I'm considered to be, or, you know, I'm not the final word on whether I'm a good performer or not?
So I think that these goals have to cascade. So starting with, you know, the CEO of the company decides on the strategy of the company and what those goals should be. Then he needs to take those and pass, he or she, should I say, needs to take those and pass those down to the next level of management that can then bring in a bit of creativity about their level and how they see themselves working towards that ultimate performance. And then this cascades down to the individual. But I always think it's good for the individual to have some goals of their own, because there are the goals of the corporation, there's the goals of revenue, the goals of the number of sales or whatever it is the business is. But if you don't buy into those as an individual, you're not going to achieve them. So I do like to also make sure that a person, when it gets down to the cascaded level at the bottom, that they also add their own. You know, some of their own performance indicators that they want to strive for. Maybe it's some kind of skills they want to develop, or some kind of, you know, broadening of their skills. And it's really important to get that buy-in, so that it's not just a stick coming down, but there's a bottom up as well, so that people buy in and actually work towards achieving those.
So that's beautiful, and I really get what you mean with the buy-in. So many people, and I'm just going to put this in here, but so many people will say to me, well, how do I get my employees to add their bit? Because what the company creates and the money that will be made goes to investors. So how do I get that, you know, that dynamic at the bottom of the structure?
So for me, the thing that made me most successful as a leader, I think, is one-on-one. So, you know, I think the days are gone of when we do performance once a year, and it's about an HR tool that we have to put a big tick next to something, and, you know, people hardly read it and they tick it off and off they go. Performance management is a continuous process. And by having a one-on-one with your employees, you really get to understand what it is that they want to achieve. Why did they join the organization? How are they feeling? What is going well? What's not going well? And then you can bring that in to the corporate goals and help them drive that forward. So for me, it's one-on-one, and it's continuous monitoring, because I don't think it's working anymore to just do this once a year. I think that, you know, the world changes too much in a year. Even the objectives change within a year. So we need to be constantly monitoring our teams and constantly motivating them to work towards that goal. Because if you're doing daily work that you don't understand how it works towards a corporate goal, you're not going to be successful. You're not going to, and now with people working from home, it's even harder, because people feel like they're on an island and they're not close to, you know, the why of what they're doing. So, you know, you have to remind people, why are you doing this? You know, and it's not only for shareholders to make money, it's to provide jobs, it's to create value for customers. So there's lots of reasons why we do business. And you need to get back to your why, and that will help drive you in terms of meeting your objectives.
Perfect. So we've now spoken about how you define performance, how to define performance in a business context. Has there been a shift in how we view performance over the past couple of years?
Yeah, so as I say, I think the one thing is that it's not an annual process anymore. But it's also, I think it's important that it's self-driven. Because I don't think the old style of management where, it's coercive and you get told, if you don't do this, this will be the negative consequence. I don't think that works very well. And certainly with the latest generation, they don't respond well to that kind of army type approach. So I think that, the style of management needs to be affiliative and democratic to bring people into this process. So I think that has been the shift, is that people must become accountable at an individual level. So that it's not just about some, goal that's so far away that I don't even know how I'm contributing to the business. Because people are not staying in organizations for 30 years like I did anymore. So you need to get value out of people quickly and, for a short period of time, because they're going to move on. So, we can't rely on years of dead wood or years of no performance. Every year we need to be growing and being challenged. And for me, the best part of watching people in my team was when they're in that top quadrant of high growth, high challenge, and that's really where people thrive. When someone doesn't have enough challenge or doesn't understand what they're contributing towards a business, it's awful to watch, because they just, disappear. And in the virtual world now, they just stay on mute, they stay off camera, and they really don't feel like they're contributing to the business. So, it's all about bringing people forward and making sure if they're virtual that they're contributing, coming on camera, getting eye contact with their clients and really feeling like a part of the business. So I think that's been the change.
I hear what you're saying. So very much I hear you talking about also their sense of meaning, their sense of purpose more than anything else. So is that integral to your thoughts or your way of leadership and how you think we create great leaders? Is you've said one-to-one, you've spoken about purpose, meaning, what else?
Yeah, so leadership styles is something I'm very passionate about. When I first started out as a leader and I managed a team of 50 people that were doing support for international clients, it was a very tough environment, 24/7, highly pressured. I thought that I should be fair to everybody and that I should treat everybody the same and that I should actually, come across as this, caring, considerate manager across the board. And then I learned that it's not about that. It's actually about discretionary management, because different people have different personalities. They are motivated in different ways. They like to be rewarded in different ways. And so I actually realized that you may have a natural style of leadership. And mine is to be very affiliative because I'm a very people person and I put the person first. But that's not always appropriate for each of your people in your team or for every situation. So, if you think of a democratic style of leadership, it's like, let's get buy-in from everybody. If there's a fire, that's not the best style of leadership, because we can't say, there's a fire, should we agree to leave the building? So when there's a crisis in the business, you have to draw on other styles like coercive or authoritative because of the crisis situation. But then that's not a good place to stay. You get back to your natural style of leadership and you use that in different ways. So, Daniel Goleman, defines these different styles, and he says it's like playing golf. You don't play the whole round of golf with one type of club. So, I learned that actually it doesn't make me inauthentic to go to a different style of leadership. It just means it's necessary, so that you use these different clubs as you go around the course, and that's how you get to success.
I do. I love that. And I'm so glad that golf finally has a real purpose.
Yeah. It sounds like a very frustrating sport.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful metaphor. And I suppose that, as you said, this ability to flex your leadership style, it takes a lot of skill and training, as you said, to not come across inauthentic.
It also starts with self-awareness. EQ, we talk a lot about emotional intelligence these days, and that starts with self-awareness. So a leader needs to be self-aware to start with, and then you start getting to an awareness of your team and the different types of people that you're managing and rewarding. For example, I managed technical people most of my life, And they don't like their name and lights and trips and all these things. And I made a big mistake of rewarding somebody that did a great job with an overseas trip and name and lights. And they said to me, please don't do that. I just want the money and I'm going to take my family out. So I made it, I realized then that you actually need to be discretionary in how you reward people and how you motivate them. So I think that takes some skill, but it also is just an awareness thing. If you start or ask people, ask them, what is it that motivates you? When you have your performance reviews, I always had two questions. What's working for you? And I asked them to say the positive first, because technical people love to have a list of negative things. I'd say, park that. What is working well for you? And we started with that. And then I'd say, what could be even better? What are the things you're struggling with? And in that conversation, you can say to them, how do you want me to interact with you? What is your communication style? How do you like to be rewarded? So, if you're a new manager, you can ask these questions. And then as time goes by, you will get to know your team and you'll start treating them in different ways. And I think that makes for the most successful kind of leadership.
I agree entirely. But the question I do have is, how do we get this done in larger businesses? Because often they overemphasize things like consistency. So, we have to treat everyone the same for the sake of fairness.
So to be honest, I think I stood out in the corporates because I had that approach, and a lot of my colleagues that were leading would kind of had especially in a sales organization, the big stick approach. But what was interesting as well is they did some research and they said, okay, well, you've got the stick or the carrot approach, but don't confuse people, because if they put people in a room blindfolded and they tried with the big stick to get them to find the right chair, and they were, they would just smack them if they went the wrong way. And it took a certain amount of time. And then they tried the carrot approach. You're getting hot, you're getting cold, and eventually the person found their seat. What's most confusing is if you have a carrot and a stick. So you smack the person because they go the wrong way, then you tell them to go the right way, and the person never found their chair. So yes. I think you're right in terms of consistency. You don't want to be one day smacking people, the next day trying to reward them. But I still think that if you understand what I'm saying, it's more that you're bringing out the different styles for different situations, rather than being inconsistent or inauthentic.
Love that. I hear what you're saying. So while we're talking about differentiating, and dealing with people really on the basis of their needs, I wanted to ask you what you think, as we met at your women's event, what do you think is the role of women's groups in the business environment? Are they helping us, and what are the things they're doing?
Yes, so in many of the large organizations I worked in, I was the chairperson for the women's groups, because I found that in such a male world, there were very few women in senior leadership positions, because we don't ask. We hold ourselves back and we think we have to be humble. And in these groups, I try to focus on helping women find their voice and ask for promotions and put themselves forward. Sheryl Sandberg in her book talks about lean in. So when you're at the board table, instead of leaning away and think, I better not say anything because I'm the only woman in the room, you lean in and you bring your womanhood. So I don't like these approaches of, I have to be like a man to be successful. I think as women, we've got a lot of characteristics to bring to the boardroom. We're very intuitive, we're very observant, we can be very caring. Not to say that men can't be these things, but we can bring that. So I like us to bring what we can as women to the workplace and into the boardroom. But women need help with that. The men are maybe better at going to the pub or the golf. Certainly before COVID, they could do those things. We had to create these network groups to make sure that women, found support amongst one another. So, women supporting women and lift as you rise. These are some of my mottos. Because a lot of women managers have forgotten about what it was like to be at the bottom, and they haven't brought the other women up with them. So even women need the message to say, lift as you rise. Mentor younger people, be a good example to younger people. One of my worst managers was a female manager. When I had my first daughter, I left the organization and she was really nasty to me about it because I think she hadn't. So she thought I was making some kind of statement. And that's disappointing to me when women don't support women. So in these groups, what we did was we focused on helping women find some confidence, but we also focused outward. So we started to work with our customers to help senior women and customers also find some support, because it can be a lonely place. If you're one of very few women in a senior position, and all the male voices around you, you need other women to just identify with you and support you through that process. So that's why, I like to be involved in those groups in the corporate environment, because I think it was very necessary. We also then started to do a lot of corporate service work, and women are very good at that. We started to build gardens for schools and, do mentoring for young women and lots of lovely projects that really pulled us together as an organization and helped us to also look outward. So it wasn't just, stalk parties and tea. We really had meaning to these groups. It was about, it wasn't about makeup and hair. It was about doing real work and coming together to make a difference in our companies and in the world.
It's so interesting that you say that. So we're sort of coming full circle back to the golf course and needing all the clubs, because then there's a place for women as well. If we take a look at 4IR, we're seeing that the repetitive, basic, structured skills can be taken over by robots, but what's coming out is skills towards, being able to work better with each other, skills towards interpersonal understanding, and that sort of intuition, that kind of thing. Do you think that bodes well for women in senior management positions?
Absolutely. It is concerning that at a lower level, for example, women that sew, for example, those things could be done by a machine. But now the women can spend more time creating designs, creating fashions, creating, new things. So I think it's pulling out our right brain, because a lot of left brain things can be programmed into a computer, and that can be done. And why do we want to spend time doing repetitive insurance claims or sewing 3,000 masks? So I think it's just shifting us to be more creative. And that's wonderful, because I think if we develop our right brains, that helps us to, to be more, it's the whole EQ side, it's the whole interactive side. And it's, it wasn't encouraged when I was at school, to be honest. We were very much encouraged to be left brain and do as you're told, not too creative. And I think it's so good now that even my children, when they went through school, they were encouraged much more to be innovative, entrepreneurial, and all of those kind of skills. So I think it's going to be good for women, because as long as we accept the change, then I think that we can, start using our right brains and bringing a different aspect into the workplace and leave the mundane tasks to a computer.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think there's a releasing of potential there that we're still going to see, especially amongst the younger kids who just sort of will be raised with this. So I want to come back to our topic of performance. And I'm very interested to hear from you. Is there a difference between performance in a corporate versus performance in a startup, and how it gets measured and rewarded?
So the corporates that I were in were very much driven by shareholder value and shareholder returns. So it's exhausting, because it's, you've already been running for some years. These companies are 100 years old, and it's hard to keep performing. It's hard to keep growing. It's hard to keep pleasing your shareholders. And so they constantly have to innovate and change and have new objectives and new products to keep that up. So it started to be like an annual thing, and then it started to be a quarterly thing. And now they're having monthly reviews, daily reviews, and it's incessant. It's quite exhausting. And the only way to survive is to keep changing in those large corporates, because, the products get tired, and then these little niche competitors come along, and then they have to morph again. So the ones that have survived have changed a lot every year, and that's exhausting. So I find in a corporate environment, performance is around sustainability and constantly achieving new and better values. In a startup, it's a different energy, because it's such sudden growth. So, if you start measuring 10%, it's like nothing, so you have to grow it like, a trajectory. So there's such an energy about a startup that is really invigorating. So that's what I loved about it, is because you're coming from nowhere, anything you achieve gets you going. So you have to celebrate the small wins, and then, the growth starts coming. And then, to be honest, a lot of successful startups end up like the corporates, needing to sustain this now, and change and have new products, and they get back into that same mold. So I think it's just that it's that initial ramp up that is difficult, but also brings an incredible energy.
I don't know if this is really a fair question, but is it easier to get good performance in a startup? It just feels to me sometimes like in corporates, everything is slow and sluggish. It takes a while to get through the bureaucracy. Is it easier in a startup or not really? Is it just a stereotype?
Yeah, in my experience, it takes time. So you have to be patient. And I feel it's more of a roller coaster in an entrepreneurial or startup world than it is in corporate because, you've got all those processes, you've got all that support. In a startup environment, there are days when it feels absolutely fabulous. And when you're at the top of your game, there's nothing better than that feeling. And the next day you'll have a rejection and you're down again. So I think resilience is what is the word I can think of, that if you're going to try and do your own company or be in a startup or be an entrepreneur, you're going to have to be very resilient. You're going to have to take the knocks and lift yourself up again. One thing you can do is when things are going well, use that energy to drive further. But I don't think it's easier. In my experience, it's actually tough because especially if you're a small company, there's nobody else to turn to, there's nobody else to blame, there's nobody else to take, responsibility for things. So you really have to be very self-driven and you have to be very tenacious. But the feeling of, the growth can be, higher than in a corporate, and that feeling, there's nothing to beat that.
Let's talk a little bit. We've spoken so much about how you got to this particular point. And where you are now starting your own entrepreneurial journey, or you have started. I wanted to ask what projects you're currently working on, of course, other than your women's networking that I know about already. What else do you work on?
Okay, so I have three things that I'm doing in my company. One is coaching. So that is, it varies between, coaching someone in a leadership perspective or executive coaching, helping people find executive presence, and, rising up and, quietening the negative voices in their head, a lot of that kind of work. A lot of people right now are needing help with career change due to retrenchment, or maybe an insecurity in a current environment, or maybe their own company that didn't make it through COVID. So a lot of my work has been towards helping people find new careers, pivot, maybe start new things. So that's been very interesting. And then the second thing that I do that's more corporate is I've partnered with a company called Inspired Leadership, and we provide leadership training for corporates. And we're focusing on two sets of people. One is the emerging leaders, because we found that there's often a gap in an organization. Before, when you started, you got a graduate program and you were handheld, or maybe when you knew there's a bit of an induction program, and then you get lost in the sea before you next get training when you become a manager. So we've actually targeted that gap of emerging leaders because we believe in that pool. More than 50% of those people feel like the corporation doesn't care about their future because they're just kind of left to get on with it. So if we target that group and we can retain them and we can harness those and start developing those leadership skills to create a pipeline for leaders later. The other thing is, because I was many times in a technical world, a lot of people may be leaders, but not managers of people. So, maybe a technical expert or a functional expert, they still need leadership skills because they work in teams. They work with customers, they work with colleagues, and they need to have that EQ or emotional intelligence to be able to deal with other people, even if they're never going to manage teams. So I think leadership is something that we all need to learn. Even if you're fairly junior in an organization, dealing with other people is something that we have to start learning very early on. And then we can watch those people, and the best ones will bubble up and become managers. And then we also have a program called Manager to Leader, because we think most organizations are taking care of helping managers learn the tools and learn how to be a manager, but they're not necessarily focusing on how to be a good leader. So that's what we do. And, I'm loving the work that we're doing. I'm working with an IT organization and helping them, helping their emerging leaders and their managers to really focus on self-awareness, leading themselves, then secondly, leading others, and thirdly, leading the business. So, that's my passion. And I'm really enjoying, bringing that to corporates in a more formal fashion in that part of my business.
Lovely. So a quick question about this leadership training. So I come from a learning and development background. So often we will find people are only sent on leadership training because they've just been promoted. What are your thoughts on that? Is there a broader scope of people to be included, and must I wait till the person's been promoted before I start preparing them for that leadership role?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. We absolutely believe that you should start early, and that's what this emerging leaders training is about. And so we have a unique method that we do as well. We ask the organization to put their potentials in a room. So, 30 people. And they maybe are the pipeline of emerging leaders that the organization has identified. They sit in that gap between graduate and manager. And then we actually present the program to them, because it's actually a blended program. There's a lot of online, and then we have some, injection of facilitation once a month where we actually meet with the person, some accountability, some networking. And then we ask people to nominate themselves for this training. Because if people volunteer themselves, they're much more likely to see it through. They're much more likely to take accountability for their learning. Because what we found is that there's the two extremes. If you do classroom only, which is the way I was taught to be a leader, you get taken out of the business, which is difficult in these times. You get put into a classroom, and the training is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but it's intensive, and we only have the ability to take 14 new things in a day. So I loved what I learned at those courses, but sadly, when I got back into my day job the next Monday, a lot of it was lost on me. On the other hand, if you have online only, it's very hard for an organization to really harness that learning and see any return on investment, because a lot of people are doing it. It's kind of overdone now, and they're doing it to get a tick. Oh yeah, I got through that and I passed the exam and I got the badge. That's not what we're about here. So we have this blended approach where there is a lot of online. So the person is accountable for getting through the theory, watching some TED Talks, getting some theory, and then applying it. And then by the time I meet with them once a month, I'm asking them, how did the application go? Not how did the learning go, but you started applying it. What changed? What was your aha? What did you learn about yourself? What did you experiment with? How did that go? So there's some accountability and some application of the learning. It's like if you go to gym, you don't go to gym once and then become fit. You're going to be very sore after the first day, in fact, but you've got to keep going to the gym. And we have to change people such that once the course is finished, they will continue to apply that learning and apply those leadership skills. So I love the approach. I think blended is the way to go. And I think that's, and as I say, this volunteer approach that we have makes for a very successful, application of this learning within organizations.
Lovely, because people buy in. Then you are also working on a I'm Remarkable initiative.
So I'm Remarkable, with hashtag I'm Remarkable, is a Google initiative, because Google realized that, like we spoke about earlier, a lot of women don't do self-promotion. Then they also realized actually a lot of unrepresentative groups also don't self-promote. So they've broadened it to say anybody that's really struggling with self-promotion, this program is for them. So it's a 90-minute workshop that we run, and it's a free workshop. And in fact, we're right in the middle of I Am Remarkable Week this week. So it's globally, there's a lot of workshops being run, a lot of focusing on this for this particular week. So I'm running 2 workshops this week as well, one tomorrow, one next week. And it's about just helping people to learn how to self-promote. That's not bragging. And the comment we say is it's not bragging if it's true. So, I quite like that. And that accomplishments don't speak for themselves. We need to learn how to promote ourselves in the workplace without being cocky or, bragging or being, without it being uncomfortable. So we really ask people to finish that sentence. I am remarkable because. And I can't tell you how people battle to do that. We ask them to go back into your childhood. What makes you remarkable? Some people say, well, I'm remarkable because I'm a mom. Well, why is that remarkable? It may well be remarkable because you may be a single mom, or you may have, not had a good example of a mother that you had to learn from. So there are things that make you remarkable, but we don't stop to think what they are. And it's wonderful when I run these programs to see people get it. Wow, I actually am remarkable. And then they start seeing themselves in a different light and just start coming across more confident in the workplace and start asking for promotions and getting the deserved positions. So I'm really excited about it. I've just qualified as a trainer recently, and I will be running these workshops on a regular basis just to help women and other groups of people to really find their voice.
So I know you're having another one tomorrow, largely because I will be there and I will be attending. But I think it is incredibly important because I agree with you, and specifically from a female perspective, I think so many of our cultural norms, when I say so many of our, I think all women across all ethnicities, We were taught to be quiet and not blow our own horns, and from that perspective, it can be quite difficult for us. So it is the leadership. It is hashtag I am remarkable, which I absolutely love and I'm so excited about. Then on the 12th of December, you're having another event, and that is for Phoenix Empowering itself. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, so I've sort of committed to do some women's networking events, probably one a quarter. And I did have my first one, which is where we met, and that was about Women Reinvented. And I had a wonderful panel of women sharing their stories and just encouraging other women that it's possible to reinvent yourself many times throughout your life, and that it's never too late, or it's never too scary. And it was really encouraging. Then I had a lot of the men saying, well, we would have benefited from that too. Can we come along? So I decided for this next one, it's my year-end function, and I will have been going for 6 months on that day. So I thought, let me invite them in as well. So we're going to celebrate together. And I decided I'm going to have a craft gin store, and I'm going to have a craft wine store, beer store. And I thought, let me play on that and call it Craft Your Next Normal. Because, we're talking a lot about the new world that we're going to be facing and this next normal that we're going to be facing next year. So I want to do two things at the event. One is to reflect back on 2020 and say it wasn't all bad. We learned some wonderful lessons from 2020. I changed my entire life, as did many people. So let's look back and find the good in that. It was a tough year, and we weren't ready for it. So it was like diving into the deep end. But we've got some great lessons that we can learn from that. And then let's take a look at 2021 and say, what is our next normal going to look like? And how can we take some of those lessons and take them into the new year and set our new goals, our new performance measures, our new environments, so that we are better prepared for next year than we were for this year. Because we are for sure knowing that it's not going to go back to the old normal. We can already see, and quite a few of my colleagues and friends and coaches are changing their lives. They are now having part-time roles. They're now having virtual roles. I was speaking to some teachers last night, and most of the schools are going to have an online school. There'll be a whole school that's going to handle the online curriculum. So if you don't want to go back to a classroom, you can now sign up to an online school. So that's fascinating, new way of working. And many businesses have also said they're not going back to the office full time, if ever. So, now we can actually plan for it. So let's sit together and craft our next normal. And I think that'll be an exciting way to end the year. And then we're going to have some, a meal and some drinks together. So, I hope that you will be there, Innocent, to join us again. And anyone else who's listening is more than welcome.
Wonderful. I'm very excited to be there, Ocea. I can't wait. It seems like there's no end to your energy around everything that you are doing right now with all of your initiatives. But I also remember that at the previous networking event, you also mentioned She Loves Data initiative. What's that about?
This also combines all my passions together, because I had a very technical career in data and analytics for all of my my IT years, and then together with the women's work that I'm doing and the leadership. So there's a global initiative called She Loves Data. And this is it's an NGO, and it started in Singapore, in fact. And this is about helping young girls develop skills in order to go into data careers. In fact, it doesn't have to only be young girls. If you're older in your career and you'd like to pivot towards a data career, we help you to build those data skills. So things like data science, there's not enough of those around, and there are very few women doing these degrees. So we're trying to encourage young women from a very early age to take maths and science, to not leave themselves out of the race to get into an IT or data career. And then we start building their skills in analytics, in business intelligence, in all of those kinds, and in data science, so that they can actually start getting into data careers, and we can fix this situation where there's so few women in this data world. There was a very interesting study that actually showed that AI engines are now being written by men. So it was actually Amazon who was doing recruitment, and so the AI engine actually did some analysis of previous applicants for a particular data technical role, and saw that it was mostly men. So now they put the engine to work, and when an application came in from a woman, they were disqualified based on the rules of the AI engine.
Yes.
So we have to make sure that women are involved in building these models to make sure that we don't have this discrimination coming out of a computer, for goodness sake. So, so that was a scary story. So that's because women are not involved in building these models. And so we're not making sure that it's keeping us fair in terms of some of this automation and 4IR that you spoke about going into our future. So the more women we can get into this environment, the more we can encourage, the fairness and bring the women's voice into the analytics space. And it doesn't mean that you're going to have an IT career. If you're a finance person, you're going to be a data analyst. If you're an insurance person, you're going to be a data analyst. If you're in a bank, so whatever industry you're in, you're going to come across data. My daughter is a pharmacologist and she works for a data science company, and they're doing COVID trials and they're looking at data patterns. So whatever industry you're in, you're going to come across this. So she loves data. We run these workshops. And actually, COVID has really helped us because we used to have to go to corporates for sponsorship and get a venue and a lunch. Now we're doing them virtually, and you can join these anywhere across the world. So please follow, She Loves Data on social media, and you can get involved in these workshops that are free. And I'm part of the founding committee for the South African chapter, and we're going to have some specific South African ones that will we'll talk to, the kind of things that we need in this country, and maybe even get to some face-to-face in the future, which will be lovely.
Lovely. Right. So a note for myself is that in our session notes, I'm going to pop in not only your LinkedIn link, but I will also highlight links to each of your initiatives. But Ocea, one thing that is remarkable to me is about how much energy you have to actually drive all of this. And I mean, you've been hit really hard because of COVID and, being retrenched for. How do you keep your energy going?
Okay, so I don't work alone. I have a tribe. I haven't hired anybody in my organization, but I already have a tribe of people that I work with, people like yourselves, and I collaborate a lot. So for me, to be honest, I use the energy of other people. That gives me energy. I meet for coffees with people. I work with, I've got a marketing team that I work with, and I've got coaches that I work with, and all of that gives me energy to keep going. So I think if I tried to do this all alone, it would not have worked. So I think it's important to surround yourself with people that can help you keep your energy going, because it's even harder in a startup. Or in an entrepreneurial space. So you don't have to work alone. You don't have to hire people to have a team. So I have virtual teams. I'm naturally sort of already leading people and bringing people in because I don't like to work alone. So I think that's what helps me, is I get energy from others and then I go forward. But like we've said before, as you get successes, that gives you energy to try more things. And I think I've just bottled up so many lessons from my life that I feel like I just want to share and get across to other people while I can. So I think that's why probably it seems like I'm doing a lot and very energetic. So I just feel like I've had a great life, and I want to share that with some other people. And it's that whole lift as we rise thing. My company is called Phoenix Empowering, and my tagline is rise to your best you. So that's really what I'm trying to help people do, is to help other people rise to their full potential. And that gives me great pleasure.
Awesome. Well, then you are the right person to ask for a productivity tip, because it seems like you can pack quite a punch when it comes to productivity.
So one thing I just wanted to bring forward is work-life balance. So, I've talked a lot about working with women and having been a mom and a single mom for a long time myself. I think what's really hard is to balance all of this. And even in my new company now, how do I balance all of these initiatives that I have? And the thing that really works for me is to say, when you are there, be really there. So, for a working mom, that is a very useful piece of advice, because I found when I was at work, I felt very guilty that I wasn't with my children. And then when I was with my children, I felt really guilty that I wasn't working. So you can just feel split all the time. And now with my different initiatives, I'm spending too much time on She Loves Data. I'm thinking, I should be doing more on Inspired Leadership. But when you're there in a situation, be really there. It's about mindfulness and presence. And that, just if you take that tip with you, you'll see that, this idea of multitasking is not a good idea. Because we are trying to do too much. We are trying to be on an interview while we're still checking our mail, while we're still, making the food. But it doesn't work well. And what scared me the other day on a workshop is a psychologist told us if we continue to push our brains like this with this multitasking, it can lead to dementia. That really scared me. So now I'm going to try. Yeah, I'm now going to try to be much more present in whatever I'm doing. Let's stop this, trying to do a million things at once. Let's be really there. So when you're with your children, put the phone down. I know it's very tough, and spend the time with your children. And when you're at work, leave the home at, it's harder now when you're working from home, but maybe have a way of setting a boundary so that when you're doing your work, you can really do your work well, then you can take a break and you can go back and be with your family. So I think that's it. When you're there, be really there. That's my piece of advice.
I adore that, and I must admit, I've had that sense of guilt of when you're doing the one thing, you should be with the other, or you should be with this, or you should be with that.
And this is the thing about your own business. I guess you have to stop every now and again and see how far you've come, because it's very daunting if you think about how far you've still got to go. So that's part of it too, is just, making sure that you recognize the progress that you've made, whether you're in a corporate or in your own business. Reward yourself for the steps that, as far as you've come. I think that's also important.
Definitely. Ocea, thank you so much. Wow, there is so much that you are doing. I could keep you here for hours, but if anyone should want to reach out to you and hear more about your initiatives, I will put all the links into the session notes. Is there a place they can contact you?
Yeah, sure. So you can I have a website for Phoenix Empowering, or as you see on the screen, you can contact me on ocea@phoenixempowering.co.za. And then, you'll find me on Facebook and LinkedIn, as well as my website, and you can follow me, and then you'll be able to keep up with some of these initiatives.
Perfect. And how do we get an invite to the Women's Networking event? Can we just pop you an email, or how does that work?
Yes. So I will be sending an invitation out next week, and there will be a link to Cricket where you can buy your ticket. And but if you don't get the advert through one of my channels, then you can also just email me and I can forward you the invitation. So there is a save the date out there so long. It's for 12 o'clock on the 12th of December. But in the meantime, I will be posting the invitation next week with more of the details, and I hope to see you there.
Perfect. So that would be a live event in Fourways, Johannesburg, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it's actually in Kyalami or Crowthorne at Susanna's at Susanna's Deli, and it's at 36 Crowthorne in Kyalami.
Perfect. Wonderful. Ocea, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us and share so much of your experience. It is really appreciated, and I do hope that we are going to get you many follows for all the incredible work that you're doing with all of the initiatives that you have.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks. So everyone, once again, we have had a lovely chat at the Performance Cafe, and so wonderful to hear the experiences of ladies in leadership. And then I do look forward to seeing you next week. But before we get there, if you have enjoyed this episode, please, if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. The button is, I think, down there somewhere. And then if you have found us on Facebook or on LinkedIn, please like, share, and comment. We would love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear from you if there are people that you think we should have as a coffee companion. But until next week, Tuesday, when you and I are visiting solo again, I do hope that you have a great weekend and enjoy a cup of coffee. Goodbye.